FilthyRobot here, just about to start the breakdown of the Baldur Gate 3 classes, and wanted to remind you all that we do not have complete information for this quite yet. A number of these classes are in the game, but only up to level 5 as part of early access, and a number of these classes are not, or subclasses rather, are not yet in the game at all. So the information I'm going to provide to you guys is a little bit of data mine stuff collected on websites, a little bit of my own D&D knowledge going into this, a little bit of previous subclasses, and a little bit of the information released on the games. What this means is some of these things are going to be a little bit inaccurate. Some things that are reported as an action might be a bonus reaction. Some of the things that happen in normal mechanics of D&D may not apply to the Baldur's Gate 3 game. They may have tweaked these engines a little bit. Where I notice these differences or where I can see them, I'm going to try to highlight them. And when I think these are going to have implications on how the character plays, I'm going to mention that. But just a caveat that not all of this information will be exactly accurate because of the sources that we're drawing from. Hey guys, we're going to check out the Baldur's Gate 3 Rogue class, taking a look at what they've given us to work with here. So just general rogue stuff, D8 HP dice, which is pretty low. Only access to light armor and no shields to begin with, which is pretty restrictive in both the items they're using and also means they're not very tanky by and large. Dex and int saves. Dex super good versus area effect things like fireballs and lightning strikes and that kind of stuff. But int is a pretty rare save. Those saves are fine, but not exceptionally great. They're better for a martial character like the rogue than a caster, for example, because there's no concentration saves to worry about. So con saves a little bit less exciting. Rogues tend to be fairly single attribute dependent. They really care about dex for things like sleight of hand, stealth. All their damage is finesse based in general, so bows or like rapiers or that kind of thing. So dex is super important to them, but any other attribute isn't so important. They obviously require a little bit of con, so they don't fall over the first time someone hits them, but they're mostly trying to rely on range, positioning, or stealth to avoid damage. So they don't need many attributes. And the upside of that is they can fulfill, they can kind of help a little bit for covering some of the skills you might want covered in your party. Like maybe you don't have a wizard, so you want someone to have some int stats, or maybe you have low wisdom on your characters as a whole, so you can pump the wisdom up in the rogue because it doesn't require a lot of stats elsewhere, and you can fulfill some of those roles, which is pretty good for the rogue. Rogue isn't so great to multi-class into. The primary damage dealing thing on the rogue, the way the rogue participates in combat is through sneak attack. Sneak attack is an ability that triggers once per turn. And it gives you additional dice if you've dealt damage and have met some criteria. The criteria generally are one of your allies is within 5 meters of the target you're attacking, or you have advantage on your attacks versus that target. Then you get these sneak attack dice. Sneak attack dice are doubled off crits. So things that force crits on rogues or give you extra dice for extra chances to hit crits tend to be pretty good on rogues if you can get that sneak attack damage. That said, a lot of times subclass stuff allows you to tweak your sneak attack a little bit differently or otherwise play into that a little bit. So let's have a look at what these sneak attacks are doing and then also the general rogue progression. I think we'll start there actually. Rogue level 1 gets expertise. It's one of the two classes, the other one being the bard, that gets a source of expertise to begin with or very early in their class, and then they get another one a little bit later. Expertise is double proficiency bonus for a skill of your choice. So if you already have the skill, you can then make it an expertise skill, so you can double proficiency bonus there. This makes them pretty reliable at that skill, right? So basically what that's doing. It's going to allow you to more regularly hit that skill if you need it. Oftentimes one of those is going to be spent in stealth on a rogue, and having a character who's capable of stealth tends to open up a lot of dialogue and combat options, which I really, really like. But there's all sorts of other ways you can go with that. You can lean into like sleight of hand if you want to be stealing stuff. You can lean into one of your persuasion skills if you manage to go, or I say persuasion skills, one of the charisma skills if you want to go one of those lines with a rogue, like a charisma-based rogue, to kind of help with those skill stuff. Maybe you just need somebody who needs to do nature well. Well, there's your option kind of deal. So I do love expertise. It's super nice. Here you can see the sneak attack dice. It scales off rogue level, so it makes multi-classing the rogue a little bit tricky since the dice are entirely dependent on your rogue level only. Subclass comes in at 3, which is a little bit late for a multi-class spec. You're not going to get those bonuses without a big investment in rogue. Level 2 is super good. This is cunning action. This is a bonus action feature that allows you to do one of 3 things. You can either dash, disengage, or hide if you have broken line of sight. This doesn't actually list hide, which is interesting. I wonder if they've removed hide. That'd be a huge shakeup how rogue combat normally behaves. Normally rogues are hiding, attacking from being hidden, which is a advantage roll for you. And then if the opponent perceives you, which is a perception check against your stealth DC, then you will try to break line of sight and re-hide using the cunning action. And you do basically one attack per round like that as a rogue. can't tank for shit as a rogue and you're pretty squishy, but that damage tends to be decent if not particularly spiky, and fairly consistent damage since you tend to be attacking at advantage. Lots of times it doesn't work out exactly like that, but that's the way it is. Rogues also get 1 extra ability score or feat. They get everyone else gets it every 4 levels, 4, 8, 12, etc. Right? But the rogue gets 1 at 10 as well, which means the rogue and the fighter for the level range of Baldur's Gate 3 are going to have 1 more feat compared to everybody else if you stick to that class without multi-classing. So you can do a little bit of specialization on the rogue above and beyond what other classes can do, especially since you don't care about having lots of different attributes. You only care about your primary attribute basically, and then you can spend the rest on feats if you have feats that you're interested in doing. All that's fairly interesting to me. I do like rogues. I think they're generally pretty good. They also get a lot of interesting stuff as they level up, assuming they stick to the normal D&D stuff. These are all, again, guesses on that. Evasion is a reaction to reduce damage to half of 1 attack that you take. Reliable talent makes your things under 10 count as 10s for, I think it's everything you're proficient in, that kind of stuff. So it's just, they have some nice features in the class by and large as they skill progress through, and they tend to be useful both in and out of combat for the types of things they're doing. Let's take a look at the subclasses. First of these is the Thief. The Thief normally isn't that interesting of a subclass to me, but they've done something entirely different here than they did in Pen and Paper. Normally the Thief has an extra free action, and a free action is not a action that you can use in the combat economy very well. Mostly it's for like item interaction stuff, and having an extra item interaction doesn't tend to be all that useful in general. There's some things you can do with it, but not that great. Here they've changed that to an additional bonus action. That's really interesting to me. It doesn't immediately trigger on what the hell I can do with an extra bonus action. I mean, I can use cunning action twice in a turn maybe, so I can hide and dash or hide and disengage or something without wasting my attack action to do that, which can be useful, but that's not going to be twice as useful as having 2 cunning actions per turn is not twice as useful as having 1 cunning action per turn, because most of the time a single cunning action will get you what you're trying to do. So really, this gets really exciting to me when I start theory crafting. What else could I do with it? How can I combine this with the rest of my team, or some feat that I take, or some racial ability, or some who knows, to make this work? And this is going to be entirely dependent on what other tools they give me, what feats are available, what weapons come out that require this, what things I can do with this. But it's exciting because I've never seen that. I've never seen this in a different version of D&D. I've never had 2 bonus actions on a character, so that's kind of cool. The second part of this, gain resistance to falling damage, is pretty unexciting. I'm not expecting falling damage to happen very regularly. So it probably isn't going to trigger very much. Probably isn't that impactful. And then the other progression for rogue subclass is quite late, right? I think it's level 9 for their second subclass improvement. So this is what the subclass does. And second bonus action sounds really subclass defining. I'm kind of excited to see what I can do with that. Arcane Trickster is the Eldritch Knight equivalent of the rogue. It is a half spell class, or third even. I think it's half though. Spell progression, wizard-based rogue. So the rogue will get access to some wizard spells. I don't find spells to be very useful on rogues by and large, so I'm kind of curious what will come out of that. I don't think very much. But the second part of this Arcane Trickster stuff is fairly interesting depending on how they implement it. This is when you cast Mage Hand, the Spectral Hand is invisible and can carry out additional tasks. This is super cool in Pen and Paper because the players tend to be fairly creative of what you can do with an invisible Mage Hand, which is super fun. So far, what I've seen in PC implementations of the D&D system is because the coding limits what you can do, you can't be as creative as you'd like to be with the Mage Hand. Now, this is Baldur's Gate 3. This is a high-cost AAA title designed to be extremely interesting with the storyline and actions and skill checks that you can do. And they've listed this as a subclass. So my expectation and my hope is there's going to be a lot you can do with this hand, and it's going to lead to some really unique situations. So I'm a little more excited about this subclass than I would be without that. So I'll have to see how this actually plays out, but it sounds kind of cool on paper for the Baldur's Gate 3 game. We'll have to see if it actually can live up to what you can do in paper with this outside of the Baldur's 3 game. So let's hope. Fingers crossed. All right. And then finally, the Assassin. I'll read you what it says here, but this is another class that's been just announced. It wasn't in the early access, so we don't have good information on it. So what they've listed here is actually what Pen and Paper Assassin does, and I don't think it's going to make it into Baldur's Gate 3 as listed. So what it does in Pen and Paper is, starting at 3rd level, you're at your deadliest when you get drop on enemies. If you have advantage on attack rolls against any creature that hasn't taken a turn in combat, and if you score a hit on a creature that is surprised, it's a guaranteed critical. which meant that if you could force a surprise round, which you did from not being perceived when you first attacked and them failing, I think it's a perception roll. Once you've done that, then you get a round where they can't do anything. They have a debuff that is removed on their turn, but basically stuns them for that. So as an assassin rogue, what you had to do was you had to get a surprise round, and then you had to roll higher initiative than the opponent so that you would attack them before their surprise debuff was removed. And then if you did that, you would get advantage on your attacks and guaranteed criticals if you attacked creatures that you went ahead of in the initiative order on that first turn only. It was kind of an alpha strike kind of thing. It never felt super good to play. It's hard to manufacture surprise rounds. It's not reliable which creatures will roll better initiative than you. So half the time, even when you get a surprise round, enemies will go before you in the turn order, which means you don't get your guaranteed criticals versus those. So you end up shooting targets that aren't as good to shoot or a harder position, blah, 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 right? It's not a very reliable skill, and the impact was pretty limited from only existing on that first round. You did get some really spiky damage things where, you get a guaranteed crit. Well, you get sneak attack dice. Your sneak attack dice are doubled by crits. So you get a ton of damage on that opener kind of deal, but it wasn't super reliable. And I don't even think it's going to go in as this. If we judge from what we saw on the Ranger class rework of the initiative-based opener classes, subclasses, they changed that quite a bit. So is this one going to be changed? I don't know. I don't expect it to go in as that. And if it goes in like this, I probably won't be playing it because I've had a lot of experience with this in the past. I don't really like it. But if they change it a little bit, it's a very fun combat-oriented rogue class. So in other words, all three subclasses to me look interesting for different reasons, and are to be determined based on what actually comes out of the Baldur's Gate 3 stuff, whether or not they're going to be super exceptionally interesting or not. But the rogue class looks solid, in other words, to me. And you almost always need somebody good at sleight of hand, or certainly someone good at stealth. Often want somebody good at sleight of hand, and often can use somebody who's just good on these off skills that you need covered for the party. So expertise, sneak attack, regular combat dealer, anything but a tank roll, right? Like this is just a pure DPS with some cool other effects that you get from mage hand or extra bonus action or opener attacks. So in other words, rogue looks great to me. I'm super excited about this class. It probably makes it into one of my playthroughs because it does all the things I like it to do, and it seems to have relevance in both combat and skill checks, which are going to be fantastic for me. It's probably going to be a good storyline. If I play a rogue, I probably can't play a paladin, but judging by my paladin review, I'm not that excited about the paladin, so we'll see. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about the rogues in Baldur's Gate 3, and I'll see you guys soon.